Welcome to Divcasts from University of Chicago Divinity School. For more of our podcasts and information about our terms of use, please see our website, divinity.uchicago.edu/podcasts.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's Wednesday lunch here at the Divinity School. I'm Karen White. I'm the Director of Communications here and the organizer of this series. So, thank you for coming. Before we get started, we have a few minutes of housekeeping and announcements. So, first off, I want to thank today's crew, and I think our chef was Erica today. Blair is our chef for today. Lunch from scratch every day right here, and we do ask that since they spent all morning cooking that you spend just a few minutes cleaning up after yourselves. So I think your plates are compostable today, so if you could put your plates and your leftovers into the compost and any garbage right into the garbage, and I think the yellow soapy pad is back for your utensils. If you could fold up your chairs, that's really helpful. And of course, if you would turn off your ringers or other noise-making items in this place, we appreciate that. Is there any community announcements today?
Yeah. So I'm here on behalf of Bromley, who couldn't be here today, to let you know that Heidi Newmark is coming to campus on Sunday. So Newmark is a writer, a pastor, interfaith activist, and is now the executive director of Trinity Place Shelter, a transitional shelter for LGBTQ homeless youth in New York City. She's going to be here. Two events open to the public. The first is 11 o'clock in Rockefeller for a worship service. Newmark is going to be preaching. And the second is from 12:30 to 2. There's a lunch and conversation with Newmark. You don't have to RSVP for church, but you do for the lunch. So these flyers are on campus. You're emailing Rachel Heath at rheath@uchicago.edu if you'd like to join Newmark for lunch.
Anyone else? Community announcements? No? I feel like there's something happening this week that I should be talking about. Well, check our website. And if you're not on our mailing list for events, then make sure you speak to me. I can just put you right on it. And it comes out every Friday, as well as random times when we have events. So make sure you're on the mailing list. That's the best way to know about anything that's coming out. So before I introduce today's guest, I want to encourage you to come next week and throughout the quarter. So we have a whole quarter already scheduled out. We have a lot of great speakers. Next week we're actually going to be hearing from one of our students, who I think is here, Elijah. So we're going to be one of our speakers for next week. He's going to be speaking about a project between, is it Bright Star?
Yes.
Bright Star Church and Anshe Emmet Synagogue, which on the 12th, which is this Sunday, they are going to be building an entire playground from scratch.
Yeah.
So by the time you hear from him at lunch, he will have made an entire playground from scratch in one day. But so he's going to be talking, he and his colleagues will be talking about the background, how they got there. I hope that they'll be able to bring some pictures of the, we might not have pictures of the building, but hopefully we will. So that's going to be a great topic. Yes?
And if anyone would like to volunteer, you can go to www.brightstarchurchchicago.com and just scroll down to the Kaboom section and click on the registration link there. And it's very simple. Name, first name, last name, and who you're with. Very simple.
And that's in Brownsville, so it's not
Yeah.
far. You can get there pretty easily. Okay. Anybody else? Okay. Our guest for today, I think he needs me to introduce him already before he gets any more nervous. That's what the cat out of the bag over, right? Our guest for today is Michael W. Phillips Jr. He's the founder and executive director of Southside Productions, which is a nonprofit organization that operates mostly here on the South Side, showing mostly alternative type films in non-traditional venues. So Michael's going to talk about the founding of this nonprofit, about their work. We're going to see them in their films. We're going to hear about films that are upcoming. Sometimes film, I went to one, I guess it was last summer already, in the back patio of 53rd Street Cafe. So sometimes they're right here in Hyde Park, sometimes they're further afield. but they're wonderful and unique events for mostly Southsiders. So please join me in welcoming Michael. I'm going to be passing around these little cards for you and a sign-up sheet so that you can hear all about more events. So, Michael.
So, as Karen said, Southside Projections is an organization that shows films and has conversations about them at various locations around the South Side. It's grant writing season, so I just wrote this up. I'm gonna read this instead of fumbling through descriptions. Films are chosen for their rarity, historical and artistic importance, and relevance to Chicago audiences. Most screenings are followed by in-depth discussions with people who made the film, people who were involved in the events depicted in the films, or subject matter experts. And our goal is to use film as the beginning, not the end of a conversation that examines how the art can illuminate the past and help us understand current issues. So in keeping with the spirit of Southside Projections, I'm going to show a little film and then we'll talk. This film is one of my favorite things that we've shown. It's called Sean. It's from 1970, and it's an interview with a 4-year-old kid in Haight-Ashbury, San Francisco, about things like police brutality and drugs and race issues and stuff. It's adorable. He does swear a couple times. I hope nobody's too offended about that. It's a 4-year-old. What are you going to do?
How's your car?
Yeah, and so I showed this at Little Black Squirrel in 2012 as part of an exhibition called The Tipping Point at Me and We. It was part of a program of films about basically fear of change and how we deal with impending change. And this was the capper of the program, because you'll see at the end the interviewer asked this kid, like, well, so, what are you going to be like in the future? And the answer from a 4-year-old is again, really adorable. So it's 14 minutes long. We're going to shut the lights down, and then when it's over, we will, I'll talk some more.
Yeah.
So, basically what Southside Projections does is, or the goal is to find films like that are not the films that you hear about very much, and find interesting places to show them, and find interesting people to talk about them, and then have a great conversation about them. That's the goal. It started in 2011. I had been the film programmer at this place called the Bank of America Cinema, which was a revival house up on the northwest side, hidden inside of a bank branch. Every Saturday night, we would show classic Hollywood film, Casablanca type stuff, in a 300-seat movie theater hidden inside of a strip mall bank branch. And it dated from the days when banks were local and they cared about the community enough to build a 300-seat theater in one of their bank branches as a community center. And it had run for 35 years, and then in 2010, Bank of America bought LaSalle Bank, which had owned it, and shut it down. And my associates, who were a lot younger than me, UFC grads actually, they kept it going as the Northwest Chicago Film Society. They did screenings at the Portage until it shut down. They did screenings at the Patio until it shut down. Right now they're looking for a place. And because I wasn't getting paid to drive out there anymore, because it's way Cicero and Irving Park, I decided that maybe I wanted to do something a little closer to home. So I came up with the idea of this film series that would, instead of meeting a movie theater, which are in really short supply lately, I would do smaller screenings, go out into neighborhoods on the south side that were underserved. I realized that there was no place to go to see a movie between Roosevelt and Chatham, 87th Street, other than Doc Films here. And I thought, well, maybe I could do something about that, and also explore these sort of more socially engaged films that I was interested in. And I conceived of the organization at a workshop for a city arts grant that has been discontinued, that I was attending for another organization. I thought, wow, I could become a nonprofit and get grants and do this community outreach thing with the goal of using film as a way to have discussions about things that interest Chicagoans on the South Side. And it works sometimes, and it doesn't work other times. We've had some really great experiences. Our very first screening was in the summer of 2011. It was a recently rediscovered film about the conservative Vice Lord street gang. Back in the late 60s, they were trying to go straight, following the models of the Black Panthers, doing community organizing. They bought a tasty freeze. They opened an art gallery. And I came across this forgotten film that the Xerox Corporation, for some reason, produced about their efforts to go straight and to offer community breakfast and to give jobs to African Americans on the West Side. And at that screening, I had some of the founders of the Vice Lords. I had State Senator Mattie Hunter. I had the interrupters, the former gang members who go around and try to break up violence directly in the street. It was just a very moving experience. And so in that audience, we had the current and former gang members, and South Side activists, and also sort of people like me, film geeks from the North Side. I live in Hyde Park, but I'm definitely I'm more like your typical North Side. Well, I'm not 20-something anymore, but I was. And so they were in a room and having this really interesting conversation about like how the issues in that film were still relevant. Like we had a conversation about the sort of the Rebuilding Chicago program. You see the signs all over the place, and we talked about how in Englewood the road crews don't employ Black people. They don't employ local people. They bring workers from as far away as Canada. And said, well, what has changed if that's still happening? Like, what good is this? I mean, it's good in that, okay, so we've got new crosswalks and there aren't potholes and stuff, but it's not changing the really serious social issues that plague Chicago. So that was like really, really high note that we started off on. Other screenings we've had, we showed a film about the Cicero March, which was a civil rights march in 1968 that actually Martin Luther King Jr. was advised not to go on because it was going to erupt into violence. And Bob Lucas of the Congress of Racial Equality said, well, we're going to march anyway, and it did erupt into violence. So we showed that, and Bob Lucas came and talked about his experience, and that was really moving. We showed a movie about the closing of the Pullman factory, in the Pullman factory, with the leaders of the union who had fought to keep it open. We showed a movie about the filmmaker who was at Notre Dame, named Jill Godmillo, who directed a film called Popovich Brothers of South Chicago. And it was about a traditional Serbian musical or band. There were the Popovich Brothers, and they were like the hottest Serbian music band in the country. And so she had made this film in the early 70s, and we brought her in to show this film, and at one point during the Q&A, she said, can you raise your hand if you are related to someone in this movie? And there were about 70 people in the audience. And everybody, except maybe 5 people, raised their hand. And she realized that like some of the people who were there, she had met when they were children. She had photos of her like holding these people on her knee when she was much younger. And it was this really great family reunion. Last summer I did a series. I say I should talk about that. It's a very small organization. I'm it, basically. We have a board of directors, because if you're a nonprofit, you need a board of directors. But it's my wife. Friends. And I organize most of the screenings. I do all the paperwork badly. I just this morning filed our 2013 taxes. So when I say I sort of switched between me and I. Last summer, we did a series at the Logan Center in conjunction with the Afro-Cobra exhibit that was going on, and we showed some films about the Black Panthers, and I shared a stage with Billy Brooks, who was the Minister of Education for the Illinois Black Panthers. We had a screening of films about Black veterans returning from the war, Vietnam War, and we had this. It was just this incredibly moving and terrifying, cathartic conversation with a local an artist and musician. His name is Travis, just Travis. He's in a band called Ono. If you guys are into noise rock, gospel, check him out. But he was he's gay and very out, and but he was a Vietnam vet, and he told the story of basically being tortured by the Office of Naval Intelligence because they thought he was gay. So he spent his 18th birthday at Guantanamo Bay being tortured. They wanted him to admit that he was gay. He was in communications, and back then they were worried that if you were gay, the communists could blackmail you somehow and maybe spill your secrets. So, there were 80 people in the audience, a lot of veterans, a lot of Black veterans, and we shared that just amazing, terrifying experience in talking about this. And then I'm going to go on and on. And then I'll mention one more. Just last month, we showed a film called Attica about the 1970 Attica prison riot. And on a panel were two of the lawyers who defended the Attica prisoners in their criminal trial. This was in 1970. And then in their successful civil suit against the state of New York. So they were there to talk about it. And also a guy named Benny Lee, who had been a gang member, felon, and now runs an organization that works to empower formerly incarcerated people. They fight to get people's civil rights back. They help ex-cons figure out how to use the Ventra system. Like if you've been in jail for 10 years, riding the bus is not easy. Things like that, like how to, where to get on the internet to find a job, things like that. And during the Q&A, this guy raised his hand, and he had just been released from 7 years in Stateville prison, like 3 days before. And he said, "I'm scared." It was really moving. I'm sorry. Well, so he left the screening. He had untreated diabetes for 2 years while he was in, and he left the screening with lawyers from the People's Law Office. The two guys who were on stage, they said, "Give us a call. We'll take your case." And he left the screening with a friend in Benny Lee, who was going to set him up with a mentor, to figure out things like the internet and the bus and things like that. But that was like the capstone, because we really made a difference to that guy. And it's not all serious. I joke that it tends to be radical documentaries from the 60s and 70s, because that's sort of where I lean. But as Taryn mentioned, I met her at a screening of experimental films about cats. We have coming up for our Halloween screening is avant-garde horror films, like from everywhere from the late 20s to 1998. We had when the martial artist Jim Kelly, who spent a little time in Chicago, but most of it in Los Angeles, died last year. We had a Jim Kelly Day where we showed Enter the Dragon and Through the Hard Way, and we had Black martial artists from the south side of Chicago doing demonstrations in the lobby of the Chapman Theater down at 87th Street, and I held a board while a 72-year-old man leapt in the air and spun around and kicked it and broke it in front of me. It was so amazing. So we do fun things too, but it tends to be films about social problems. so I had this grand vision that I was going to get out into the neighborhoods because, like, you know, Gresham and Auburn and Grand Crossing and all of these neighborhoods, like, you can't go see a movie. There are people who would be interested in this kind of thing, and it was my job, my self-appointed job, to get out there. One of the limitations is I'm not necessarily the right person to be doing that. I'm not a terribly outgoing person. And you have to, like, it takes a lot of legwork to, like, I can't be the white dude who shows up and says, I'm going to bring you culture, to solve your problems. Because, you know, that grates on people, rightly so. So it takes these, you have to build relationships, and you have to meet people, and you have to talk to people, and you have to go to events and stuff. And I'm kind of a homebody, and I'm sometimes in the mood to do that, and sometimes not. The internet is great because I love to email. But you know, now I have a 2-year-old, and that's a really good excuse to stay home. Even if, like, he's asleep by 8, I could go out, but I don't. And so we have done screenings in 12 neighborhoods. Since we started, we've done 32 screenings in 12 different neighborhoods. But lately, this year especially, it's Hyde Park and Bridgeport. Because it's easy. You know, you strike up a relationship with, like, the Logan Center, and I can, you know, just call and say, or email, call anybody, and say I'd like to do a screening. Here's a screening, and I know I can get some funding from, you know, from Tracy Matthews at the Race Center, and I can make that happen. Or I have sort of the programmers in residence at this place called the Co-Prosperity Sphere in Bridgeport, and they basically said anytime you want to have a screening, you can have a screening. And most of the time, like, we have a deal that any money we take in, we split with them, but most of the time, the guy who runs it's like, oh, no, you keep it. Because we like to show film from actual film. When I showed Sean here, actually, I found the distributor, and I showed a 16mm print on my portable 16mm projector sitting up on a table stacked on a table. That's the kind of, what most of the screening, or sort of my model for a good screening, is me coming in with a tripod screen and a projector and a couple of speakers and, you know, running cable, and it's very DIY aesthetic. But it's expensive, and that leads to a second limitation is we are a really small organization. We're so small that most granting organizations won't even give us any money because, like, for example, the City Arts grant, the one that still exists, they won't give more than 20% of your budget, but they won't give less than $2,500. Well, my yearly budget is $3,000. So I'm faced with trying to build that up in other ways. And again, it's grant writing season time. The prospect of navigating these really confusing rules and letters of intent and, you know, calling people, you know, I'm not the best person at that, so it's been really difficult. We have one grant from the Driehaus Foundation. Thank you, Driehaus Foundation. We're the smallest organization that they've ever funded. But we have that because one of their accounts people, like, came to one of our screenings because he lived in the neighborhood. He'd never heard of us before, and he was really interested, and he called me. So, if not for that, I don't know where we would be. I was making a list of the screenings we've done, and another limitation is, like, and this really bothers me, I've had hardly any women involved. We have 3 women on the board. The person who helps me on the grants is a woman. My social media intern, this is terrible, is a woman. But most of the people most of the films are by men, and that's the film industry, that's sort of what happens. But most of the people who I've had come in to talk have been men, and that really bothers me, because it's not representative, and I want to be representative. So that's, like, something I really need to work on in the future. And another limitation is the subject matter, like because I'm sort of gravitating toward the radical documentaries from the 60s and 70s. So the way it works is I'll find a film, it's like, wow, that's great, I need to find a place to show that. And then I go and look, a film about Cesar Chavez and the farm workers movement. And then I look to, find some place in Little Village to do it because that's where Hispanic people live. And it's like, and that's backwards. It really is backwards. I think it's backwards. It feels backwards. Because it's me still trying to bring culture to a place that, they have it. There are places in Little Village where you can see movies. There are galleries. There are community spaces. They have screenings. They have, artist groups. And what I need to do is to go and meet those people and talk to them and find out what might be of interest to them. So that's a really big goal in the future, in this next year. It's the last year of our Treehouse Foundation grant, so I really need to get it together. And so plans for next year, I want to, because I'm it's just me and I'm not the most organized person in the world, I'm really happy when I can program like 2 events out. Like, if I can actually print out a postcard like the ones that went around, and that's the first time we printed a postcard, because it's the first time we've had more than 2 events planned. And so I want to try to plan like a quarter at a time, so I can print more postcards. I want to expand the geographic reach, and I'm trying. I mentioned Little Village, and I'm actually in the process of trying to make those connections. Working with a professor at School of the Art Institute, 2 of them actually, who we're doing on-the-ground work in Little Village and can, introduce me to the people who I should be talking to. And raise more money. If anybody wants to help with grant writing, anybody's good at that, please put your name down on the email list. And a little closer to here, I'm working on an educational, a series that will be at the Logan Center of educational films from the 40s through the 60s about how they dealt with massive social change of like the civil rights movement and related movements. I was talking to an archivist who sort of specializes in that, and he said there's this magical moment in the early 60s when these educational film production companies, and for those of you who are too young, before the internet, you would have to watch, you'd watch films in class, and you'd watch a film about the pyramids, or you'd watch a film about Renaissance art, and it was a legitimate educational tool. It's also kind of a crutch for teachers. Instead of giving a lecture, which can be boring, I'm going to show you this really slickly produced, well-made film about the subject. And these films are still out there. They're in archives. They're online. Some of them, not enough. But there's this magical moment in the early 60s when the makers of these films had to accept or sort of came around to the idea that black people were subjects, and they were, like, maybe we should address films to black people instead of making films for white people about how to deal with black people. Like, instead of you're making film about the civil rights movement, and there's this magical moment in the early 60s where instead of making a film for white guy here explaining the civil rights movement, they really started acknowledging black people as part of the audience, because they always had that. And so this series of 4 screenings is going to try to analyze that. I applied, this grant application was for some funding for that, because it's not cheap to do film, shipping and print rentals and paying, I like to pay people for their work. So if someone made a film and I'm showing it, I want to pay them because they deserve it. And if someone's going to come and speak, give up their time and their expertise, I want to pay them if I can. if they refuse it, I'm not going to insist. But so we're doing a screening about films about urban renewal. One very slick and well done film about how urban renewal is like it's going to fix everything, and then a film about Black people displaced by urban renewal, about how pushing the problem out into the suburbs isn't fixing anything. And some other topics, including to sort of get it away from the United States, screening of films by the Jamaica Film Unit. So when Britain had colonies, they had a colonial film office, and they'd make films to educate their colonists about how to be good British colonists, or colonial subjects, or I don't know, to be colonized in a good way, and also things like how to operate a plow and things like that. And in the 50s, when they started losing their colonies, every few days they lost another colony, they said, okay, well, here's the equipment, here's how to operate it. Well, they already knew how to operate it. And they said, you can have it, you can do it, you can make your own film. So we're going to be looking at some films from the Jamaica Film Unit during that transitional period. And sort of, again, this, like, what happens when you take away the white guy behind the camera who's telling you, how things are done, and you let people tell their own stories. So I'm really looking forward to that. Even if we don't get the funding, it'll probably still happen at some point. That's something I'm really excited about. That's what I have. How are we on time?
We're about at the end, so
Okay.
but we have some time for Q&A.
Yeah. Anybody have any questions? So all kinds of questions. Great.
Do you coordinate much with the people associated with doc films or the cinema center? Or maybe you've gone at this at length, but I'm kind of hard of hearing it.
Yeah. Well, because the goal was to get away from the universities, I didn't do that a lot at the beginning because University of Chicago has doc films, and you can go and see really interesting programs on a lot of different subjects. Plus, they're scheduled so tight that there's no room for somebody to come in.
We're glad you've come back to the university for at least this occasion.
Yeah, and I do work with the Film Studies Center because they provide projectionists and tech at the Logan Center when I do screenings. And I've worked with employees of the Film Studies Center, like Judy Hoffman helped me plan the educational film series. She actually has made dozens of educational films, so she was my advisor on that. But I really like to get away from the university. I don't, like, even the Attica screening, which is so great and so moving, and it had so much, it was just such a great thing. I was like, this should have happened somewhere where, like, I made these people come to the university for this, and I shouldn't have done that. Like, it's sort of part of my psychological makeup, where I'm going to find some fault with it. And the fault was like, this should have been somewhere else. Because things like this happen, like there are great programs at the university all the time. I should try to do a great program somewhere else. There were a whole bunch of hands.
I was just curious, do you know what happened to Sean, the little boy?
Yeah.
There is a documentary that you can watch on YouTube where they tracked him down. Yeah, I haven't watched it yet. But
Do you have a name for that, or for him, or how would I
I
find
think
it?
it's called Following Sean or Finding Sean or
Finding
something
Sean,
like that.
okay.
If you, the director of this was Ralph Harlick, Arlyck. And if you
I'll
search
find
for
it and post it on our Facebook page.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that'd be great.
Well, I'll find something about it.
Yeah.
Because right now. What's the curation process? Like, do you just watch a bunch of films and then, like how do you find?
Here's the dirty secret behind film programming and curating. I prefer programming. The word programming, actually, I have a bracelet that says fewer curators, more programmer. I like to show things I haven't seen. Most of especially if they're on 16 millimeter and they're not on the internet and they're not on DVD, and I know I can get a copy from the New York Public Library, for example. But I'll program it. I'll do a lot of research, to make sure it's not going to be boring or boring's okay. Boring's okay, but offensive or whatever. But then a lot of this stuff I'm showing, I've never seen it before. But sort of the process is, again, it's like, lately I've just been going through the New York Public Library's film collection online and looking for things like typing in keywords. Like for example, I wanted to work with Chicago State University's Poetry Center. And I was just like, what films about Black poets are available? And I found it a really interesting looking one about Audre Lorde that I think was produced for PBS, and people saw it in a short version on PBS, but like there's a longer version. And I can't review it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to reach out to the poetry department and say, hey, would you be interested in doing an event where we show this and you've got poetry students and we could have a reading and and see if it flies. That's sort of the process. It's very, very haphazard.
It's a creative process.
It's a creative process, thank you.
Yes. So we have classes at 1:30. But first, before I let you go, when is my math film lesson?
Karen wants me to do a math film festival.
Right. Did you want to see that? Yeah.
Crickets. Crickets in there. No, I don't know.
Well, I sent around, I hope everybody got, we have Michael with more than one thing on it, more than one event. And somewhere there's a sign-up sheet, but Southside Productions also has, you have a Facebook page.
Yeah, we're on Facebook, Southside Productions. We just started tweeting, which I'm terrified of.
I'm gonna follow up on the film with Facebook, so you can find out more information online, and thank you so much.
We thank you for listening to or viewing our podcast. For more information and for other podcasts, please see our website, divinity.uchicago.edu/podcasts. Copyright, the University of Chicago Divinity School.